The first lecture of the year in our Unit 1 is on matter and its classification of matter. Just for the quickness of getting through it, I just wrote all this information in. I'll definitely go through and explain it all, but I didn't want you to have to wait for me as I was writing it all out. You can always stop or pause the lecture from time to time if you have to take down your own notes, and I please recommend that you do that. But these are just some of the common things I want to talk about and get through. Along with this lecture, I also have a reading that I have uploaded into this page that you can read through as well that will fill in any gaps I might have missed before you go ahead and do the homework. So after you watch the video and do the reading, there will be a homework. So on day 1, watch this and read this section, and then on day 2, I have you doing the homework. That'll be typical. If you want to work ahead and do both, you can gladly do that, and that'll give you the next day free if you so choose with this class. All right? Okay, so first of all, matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. And whenever something takes up space, that is said to be volume. Okay, so matter is anything that has mass and takes up volume. Even though you might not see something, doesn't mean that it's not matter. Great example that is air. Air is matter because when you blow it into a balloon, it does take up space, it fills the balloon, and it does have mass. Now, it doesn't have a lot of mass, but it does have mass if you have an instrument specific enough to measure it. Okay? There are 3 physical states of matter: solids, liquids, and gases. Now, when you look at a gas, what classifies the 3 different ones are over here. Does it have a definite or indefinite volume or shape? With a gas, when you put a gas in a container, it will spread throughout the container and fill up whatever container it is. And if there's a hole in the container, the gas will even leak out of it. So a gas has an indefinite volume and an indefinite shape. It takes the shape of any container and it fills the container no matter how big it is. So it has an indefinite, it has an indefinite volume and an indefinite shape. It is both indefinite in each of those. That makes it a gas. A liquid, there will be a boundary layer. When you pour a liquid in a container, it will cause a boundary layer. The molecules the atoms or particles are much closer together. They are just enough room that they can squeak by and move. A liquid is a fluid, and therefore when you pour a liquid, it will take the shape of any container. But it does have a measurable volume, so we can actually measure it. So it has a definite volume, but it has an indefinite shape. It takes the shape of any container, but we can measure its volume. A solid, as you can already guess, has a definite volume and a definite shape. When you put it in a container, maybe it's a rectangular solid, its molecules are extremely packed together. All the particles can do is vibrate, and it will not take the shape of a container. It is its shape, whatever it is. Now, you might have to carve it off to put it in a container, but then you'd have to physically take off some of the matter of the material. So it has a definite volume and a definite shape. All right, matter itself then can be broken down and classified into 2 basic types: pure substances and mixtures. Now, what differentiates a mixture from pure substance? A pure substance has a single set of properties. If it's a pure substance, it has one boiling point. It has one freezing point. It has a distinct, maybe potentially distinct odor. Okay? It might be a specific color. A mixture will have multiples. So if we mix together alcohol and water, both the water and the alcohol have different boiling points. So when we test the boiling point of the mixture, we're going to find that it has multiple boiling points. So pure substance is a single set of properties. Mixtures have multiples, or the conglomeration of all of them. If you mix a yellow dye with a blue dye, you get a green dye. Okay, we get the mixture of those physical properties coming together. Okay. An atom. What is an atom? In our next unit, we're going to focus mostly on atomic structure and the structure of an atom. But an atom is the smallest unit of matter that retains a unique set of properties. If I go any smaller than an atom, and we know that protons, neutrons, and electrons from physical chemistry, from physical science you had in 8th grade, we know an atom is composed of protons, neutrons, and electrons. If I take a proton from a carbon atom and a proton from a hydrogen atom, we cannot, if I were to pull them out and mix them around, I can't tell you which proton came from where. So once we get smaller than an atom, the particles that are smaller than that do not have a unique set of properties. Okay? So it's the smallest unit of matter that has a specific set of properties. Mixtures can be separated into homogeneous and heterogeneous mixtures. Homogeneous mixtures are uniform throughout. When you look at them, you can't tell that it's a mixture. And a classic example of that is salt water. When you look at salt water, you can't tell, or sugar water, you can't tell by looking at it. It has one phase, it looks like it's one liquid, but there's multiple components made in it. That is called a homogeneous mixture. Heterogeneous mixtures, typically you can tell that it's a mixture by looking at it. Not always. Specifically colloids. But colloids and suspensions are the two types of heterogeneous mixtures. What separates them is size. A suspension, if you let it sit long enough, a suspension will settle out. Great example of this is, have you ever seen milk from a cow, raw milk, before it has been taken to a bottling plant? Raw milk, if you let it sit for a day in a refrigerator, it will separate out into the cream and the whey, or the liquid portion of it. The cream will settle to the top, will rise to the top, and down below it will be mainly water with a little bit of a few other chemical substances. But then when you shake it up, you are interspersing it and making it look uniform. Okay. When I grew up, we drank milk straight from the bull tank. It was raw. So before you drank milk from that container, you had to shake it up. Otherwise, you'd get a whole glob of cream that would be put onto your cereal. Colloids do not separate out because their sizes are small enough that they stay dispersed throughout. So milk that you get from the store, white milk from the store, for example, is an example of a colloid because it doesn't separate out. It stays suspended. Okay? So those are the three basic types of mixtures taken down. One homogeneous mixture and then two types of heterogeneous mixtures. Now we can separate mixtures in this class, and all of these techniques that I've listed, these 6, are physical separations. We can physically separate mixtures based on what type of mixture it might be. If it is salt water, the great way of separating salt water would be by doing a distillation. Now I have another PDF or a URL that will take you to a different website that will physically show you what each of these techniques looks like if you're interested. But for the most part, you just know what each of them is used and when we would use them. Salt water, we're able to separate the salt and the water because they have vastly different boiling points. Salt's boiling point is several thousand degrees, while water is only 100 degrees Celsius. So I can boil salt water, and the water will boil off, leaving behind the salt. And if I run the boiled off water through a condensing tube, I can actually then liquefy it, reliquefy it, and make it into pure water. So when I'm done, I can distill it and have both salt and water separated. These are called desalination facilities, and these do occur on the coasts, on both east and west coast, except they are energy hogs. It takes a lot of energy to boil off all that water. But when they do, it is one way that you can get purified water from our oceans. Filtering is something we send it through a normal, ordinary filter paper in this class. Great example that would be when we have sand and water. Because sand is insoluble in water, it doesn't dissolve in water, its particles are big enough that it can be caught by a filter. If I put salt water through an ordinary paper filter, the salt particles are too small, they would pass right through the filter. I can't separate homogeneous mixtures using ordinary filtration. I would have to utilize other techniques like distillation. So filtering, I can separate them because the sand particles are large enough that they'd be caught by the filter. So that's when we use a filtration. Sifting is when we separate a solid mixture because the different solid particles that make up the mixture have different sizes. For example, if you have gravel and sand, I could send that through a sieve, which is nothing more than in essence, an interwoven woven set of like bands or strands of mesh material, and they have different sizes of meshes, and by shaking them, the bigger particles are caught up in top, and the smaller particles go through the different layers of the sieve until it's caught by a smaller mesh material. Okay, those people that end up sifting for gold, that's an example of how we would sift and try to collect gold based on particle size. Magnetism, pretty simple. You just run a magnet through the mixture, and if you have something like iron mixed with sand, iron is magnetic, sand is not, so when you run a magnet through it, the magnetic material would adhere to the magnet, and the non-magnetic would not. And you could just run a magnet through it, pull up the magnet, and you've got your iron separated from your sand. Crystallization, again, is where we have a dissolved substance in a solvent, like water. So let's say you have like salt or sugar dissolved in water. If you cool the solution, sometimes the solubility of the solute, the dissolved substance, drops, and because it does drop, it comes out of the solution, and as it does, it starts to form a crystal inside of the solution. Sometimes we just allow it to evaporate over time, and as the liquid evaporates, what's left behind is the solid that was dissolved in it. And when you're done, you have crystals that'll be inside of your beaker or your container. So that's called a crystallization. Maple syrup. If you ever have maple syrup in a refrigerator, you let it sit long enough in the refrigerator, it will start to crystallize in the bottom. Or even honey. That's a crystallization because the solutes are coming out of the liquid as the liquid might evaporate over time. Okay. Lastly is chromatography. What I see here is an example of chromatography paper where I have a colored dye, which is green, and I'll place it into like some water, and as the water touches the tip, it travels up the paper, and as it does so, it interacts with the dye, and as the water travels up the paper, the green dye might separate into the component dyes that make it up, and they separate out because of different particle size. I'm not sure if Mr. G last year got to the point, but those of you who have honors biology, you might have done an electrogelphoresis. You add something to, let's say, the sample, and it will cut the sample based on its sequencing of DNA or RNA, and then you'll run it through an electrical gel, and the bigger particles will travel less distance than the smaller particles. That too is separating by particle size. But in this substance, what will happen is eventually the dye would separate out into its component colors, and I'll just do a basic one that green would assume would separate into yellow and blue. Because the yellow went further up the paper, we would assume that it is a lighter or smaller dye, or the particles that make up the dye are smaller or lighter, and therefore they will travel further up the paper than the heavier or larger blue dye samples. So we're able to separate that dye because of particle size. So these are different techniques that we can utilize to separate physical mixtures. Okay? All right, turn the page. This page you don't have in your packet, but it's just a little pictorial, which we call a flow chart. You're going to do the same type of flow chart when you do the unknown powders lab, either this week or next week. Matter, this same little diagram is placed in the front of my room in a classroom that you'll see. But matter, as I said before, this lecture can be broken into mixtures and pure substances. A pure substance has one set of property, while mixtures have more than one. Pure substances can be broken down into either an element, which is one type of atom, or compounds, which are broken down into more than one type of atom or element. So again, we'd have, but what we cannot do with a compound is we cannot separate a compound by physical means. We can only separate a compound by chemical means. And an element is already the smallest part. It already is down to its atomic size. All right. Mixtures can be either homogeneous or heterogeneous. All homogeneous mixtures are solutions. And we can have, most often we think of solution, you think of just a liquid solution, like salt water or sugar water. But we can actually have gaseous solutions like air. Air is a mixture of more than one gas. We can even have solid solutions. Okay, a solid solution would be alloys, brass. Brass, a combination of copper and zinc. So we can have solid solutions, gaseous solutions, air, and then we can have liquid solutions like salt water. So we can have all different states, physical states of solutions as well. Heterogeneous mixtures are mixtures that oftentimes you can tell that it's a mixture, like trash. You can see the different parts that make up inside of a trash bag. Sometimes you cannot, and that's typically colloids. So with a heterogeneous mixture, we have colloids and suspensions, and what separates them is size. Suspensions are much larger in size. Colloids are much smaller in size, and therefore suspensions will settle over time. Colloids will not. Lastly, how do we separate a solution from a colloid? Because colloids don't settle out, how can we tell if something is a solution or a colloid? The key is something called the Tyndall effect. So if we have a solution like salt water, if we were to shine a flashlight through salt water, what would happen is light would travel out the back end, but what you would not see with salt water is you would not see light reflect through the sample of the salt water. If we were to put instead in here something like smoke into a container and send light through it, what you would do is you would see the beam of light traveling through the smoke, because when it hits the smoke particles in the air, it reflects light. And because it reflects light, we can actually see the beam of light travel through it. If we can see the beam of light travel through it, we say that it has a positive Tyndall effect. A positive Tyndall effect means that when you send light through the sample, it will scatter light, and therefore you can see the beam traveling through it. If you're sitting in your bedroom today and you're looking at light traveling through your bedroom, you might see all of a sudden some fine particles in the air of dust. And if you can see that it's scattering off, we classify then the air that you are breathing as a colloid. So if you have a positive Tyndall effect, if it scatters a beam of light and you can actually see the particulates, it is a colloid. If you cannot see the beam of light traveling through it, then it is a solution. So that's how we're able to separate solutions from colloids and from suspensions. Okay. All right, now what you have is you can go through and do the reading that I have for you in proper classifications of matter. And then when you're done with that, the next day I have a homework that's in your packet. I believe it is pages 3 and 4 of your packet. You can turn to that and you can go ahead and complete those 2 pages in your packet. Either you can print it off or you can just download it to your iPad and fill it in and write on it. And again, you can just save that packet. It'll automatically save on your iPad. And you continue to annotate and make changes to it or complete these homeworks in your packet as we go throughout this entire unit. If you'd rather prefer print off those couple pages, you can, or if you just want to take notes on it and fill it out, that is fine. Once you are done with the homework tomorrow, I will also then post a answer key to that, which you can then check it over and see how well you're doing on it. I'm not going to ask you to turn this homework in because I will have a quiz off classification of matter and properties of matter, which will be early next week, that you'll take, and the results of that quiz in essence will be what I'll use to see that you have completed these homework assignments and watch these videos and you are good to go. If you do poorly on those quizzes, then I'll probably contact you and then we'll talk about what you can do for remediation purposes. Okay, so this is what we typically do from now and through the end of the class or until we stay virtual. You'll have a video to watch, maybe a reading to read, and then you'll go ahead the next day and do the homework and check the answer key. Occasionally, some of the homeworks I will ask you to submit it, but for this one, you do not have to submit the homework. Just check the answer key, and if you have any questions with it, please contact me. Thank you.